If you react to vitamin C, it's very unlikely to be the vitamin C you're reacting to. It's everything else.
So I'm very excited to have with me today Sarah Brown, who is the founder of Pai Skincare. It's lovely to have you here, Sarah. We were just chatting offline about how products can be both natural, organic, and performance-based products. And I must say, I'm really excited by that kind of trio. And I know listeners will be as well. First of all, before we dive in, a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I think, what excites me about this actually is that so often women, I was reading that actually the average woman before she leaves the house in the morning has basically put around 160 different chemicals on her. That's the average woman, which when you just think is crazy. We live in such a toxic world. And obviously that's putting pressure on the liver and all our detoxification processes within the body. And I think so many people now are trying to embrace a more natural approach, but then they think, oh, as we were saying, am I going to miss out on the science if I do this? And how can I have all those performance benefits and anti-aging benefits and everything that I want out of a really good quality skincare product? So I was very excited when I heard that you combine the science with the natural.
Yes. Well, in our world, it's natural science. So, the way we formulate with beautiful ingredients, we're harnessing the properties from nature, but it's a deeply scientific process. But you absolutely can get extraordinary performance from natural ingredients.
It's exciting.
Yes,
so we're going to dive into that today. First of all, I know that this was all kind of started on the back of your own skin challenges. Something super common that people struggle with, urticaria. Anyone listening who hasn't heard of that kind of complicated name before probably hasn't encountered it, but people who have will. Can you just share a little bit more about what happened, what that condition is, and your journey really to arriving here?
Sure. I mean, how long do you have? But I mean, because I have to go back 20 years really. And I have the chronic form of urticaria. Actually, there may well be people listening who maybe have not had a diagnosis, but when I start to talk about it, they'll go, oh, that's what I have. And we see that a lot. It's actually very common, but it's not commonly talked about like eczema, like psoriasis, like rosacea. It just doesn't get the same airtime, which is why I always love these opportunities to talk about it, because there's many people out there who aren't getting the help they need. But so mine started in one night. So prior to that, my skin was fine, not amazing, but it was fine. And I woke up in one night, in the middle of the night, I'm itching like I cannot describe. I mean, until you've experienced this level of itching, it's very hard to describe. And it's very compulsive itching. So as you itch and as you scratch urticaria, then the rash moves as you itch. So it very quickly spreads. I always describe urticaria like a wildfire, because it is a very good analogy in terms of the speed that it moves across the body and the heat. So it spreads very, very quickly. I had in minutes hives. So it's very raised wheals and hives over 80% of my body. And then the heat comes and your skin feels so hot to the touch. You honestly feel like you're going to combust. And I had to get in a cold bath. I mean, this happened for the first time in one night, and I sat in a cold bath thinking, what on earth have I eaten?
Because I guess the first thing I was thinking as you're saying this. Like,
yes, is it some sort of anaphylactic reaction? I couldn't think of anything that I hadn't eaten before. And then it passed. And then the next night it happened again. And then it was so extreme and so odd. I took myself off to the GP very quickly, actually. And I was very lucky because I got diagnosed really quickly. And I think it's because it was such an extreme response. And, reflecting back on it years later, I think it was triggered by a bee sting, because I'd had a bee sting a few weeks before and I'd had a very bad reaction to it. And I have bee allergy in the family. I'd never been allergic to bees before, but I had a terrible reaction, very swollen back for ages. And then this seemed to trigger in me, and they are quite closely linked. So I then got diagnosed by the GP, referred me to Charing Cross Hospital, where I went and went to various clinics there, had a lot of my blood tested, and they ran tests and said, yeah, you're classic chronic urticaria. So I went away with at least a diagnosis, which is great, half the battle. The problem is that the words that followed were, it's idiopathic. And for those who don't know what that means, it means of unknown cause. And many skin conditions are idiopathic. Actually, many autoimmune conditions are idiopathic. And I will say it's one word that I think is a miserable word to hear, because it's sort of, it means that there's not a lot of solutions for you. And I was sort of sent on my way with very, very high strength antihistamines to take day and night. The night ones were so strong, felt rotten on them. And they said, yeah, just take them for life. And I said, but when I react and when I trigger, it's so bad, I can't, it's really, it really affects your life. It's really inhibiting. And there was just no answers. I said, it feels worse when I'm just before my period. Is no connection, which is nonsense, because it's very linked to hormones. I knew there were certain foods, I knew there were triggers. There were different triggers for me. Wasn't the cause, but that would trigger a flare up. And I was repeatedly told, you can't control this. No. And it was the worst thing you can say to someone with any skin condition. You can't control this. And those were the words that I was told. And this is 20 years ago. And actually, what's really interesting is back then, and I think, fortunately things have moved on a lot, but instinctively I knew that when I reacted, it was linked to other things, not caused by, but linked to other things, like whether I was run down, where I was in my menstrual cycle, what I'd eaten, and particularly when I was stressed. So I could and now it's so funny, the impact of the mind. I could, if I really willed myself, I could probably will a flare up. And it sounds absurd, but you can. It's an extraordinary thing. And I knew stress was a big trigger for me, but I had to find that out on myself. And I had to, it was just that there wasn't this connection to the sort of these other impacts on skin. But we have very finely tuned bodies, and it all interconnects. And that's and it's so obvious now, but it weirdly wasn't. And I knew it myself, but I had to kind of write everything down. And so I lived with this condition for a really, really long time.
Oh, did you? And it's quite concerning what you were saying about the antihistamines there, because some of them that you're taking at night over a long-term basis have actually been linked to really affecting the brain and memory formation and things like that. And I think often it's not thought about what are the long-term effects of those pharmaceuticals, even though seemingly it seems rather innocuous. Actually, when they're taken consistently,
yes. And the ones at night were definitely higher strength. And I think for me, they were a real crutch. And some people say, I would never leave the house without lipstick. I would never leave the house without a pack of antihistamines in my bag. I just couldn't. And I always remember the last antihistamine I took was on my wedding day, many years ago now, but I was determined. And I now manage the condition in different ways. I still have it. And I think it's important to say that, because I think skin conditions in their truest form. So there's different types of sensitive skin. There's core sensitive, which are the conditions like the ones I mentioned. So urticaria, eczema, psoriasis, acne. And then there's sensitized skin, which is more environmental. So it might be a reaction to an ingredient in your skincare. It might be something else. It might be medication. It might be, but it's more transitory, and you can manage that much more easily. But most conditions will stay, and they can be managed away, but just not always entirely. And I'm very lucky now, because my skin is so well managed, and I almost never react now. I do occasionally, but it's mild, and do you know what? And it goes back to this point about the mind. When I react, I think it's because I'm so comfortable now, and I understand my skin now, that it's not as acute. And I'm not bothered by it. I'm not upset by it. And so it's a calmer experience, and so it calms very quickly. And I do think there is that. And it's like, one of my, ironically, when my skin was at its most challenging, I was working in the States for a wine brand. It's a fantastic job. I loved it. But wine is a really big trigger for me.
I think it's a big trigger for a lot of people, isn't it? I mean, I think you see their nose go red, you get that histamine reaction, it aggravates rosacea. It's not great for hormones. Yes.
But interestingly for me, I mean, I got into granular detail about food. And so I know that old world wine tends to be better for me than new world. It's really funny. And actually you start to learn these things about yourself. And I was working in the wine industry, and wine I knew was a really bad trigger. But I love wine. I really appreciate a glass of red wine. Still, I will still drink wine, but I'm in control. And that's the difference. So that is a choice. I'm not going to forego that glass of wine because I want that glass of wine. And then you know that if you do react, it's your choice. And it changes the whole dynamic of skin because you're in the driving seat. And that's what we try to do. At Pai, we offer a free service for people just to come and talk to us, because I've walked in those shoes so much. And I know what it's like when you get into a skin rut and you cannot find and navigate your way out. And, you know, the industry I joined, which I didn't know much about, you know, a long time ago now, is very different again now. And there's so much choice out there. There's so much misinformation. It's, you know, you enter the world of actives and that's completely bamboozling for people. You know, if you want to introduce a vitamin C, you know, the complexity around just that choice, because this, you know, it's very hard to navigate depending on what you're wanting to get from your skincare.
Yeah,
especially
I'd like
if you're
to
problem solving.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to dive into that actually and the different conditions, because I think what you say there, some of the things I just pick up on is so important, because when you talk about the acceptance that you have it, but that you can make conscious choices, it reminds me very similarly when I was diagnosed with PCOS and I was pretty much told, you know, you may never have children. How disempowering is that? First of all, right? You may not be able to. I had endometriosis as well. And then with the, you know, you are more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. Again, quite scary, particularly when you had a family history. You know, the acne that you're experiencing is probably down to the PCOS, which it is. And, you know, but then understanding actually that I could make active choices it's never going to go away. Of course, I have PCOS. Yes, it takes a bit more work to manage my blood sugar than other people. But once you accept and realize that you can bring things within your control and make conscious choices, it's so much more empowering, isn't it? And I think it's similar to you, what you were saying there. But it's so often we get this diagnosis from a doctor that, you know, medication is the only way out of this. And, you know, inherently, you don't want to feel that because you are giving away your power. It's like, if I don't take this medicine, now I'm going to be suffering. It's not, the greatest approach.
I relate to that on so many levels. And I think once you take that step, and sometimes it's quite a painful step. I mean, I had to meticulously document my life to work out what my triggers were. But I always say to people, if you are struggling, just know your skin. And it takes a bit of effort, and it really does. But God, is it worth it? Because you'll start to see patterns emerge, whether it's food, whether it's particular skincare you're using and trying and reacting to. You'll start to see common ingredients. You know, it does take some unpicking, but it was life-changing for me. Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this for a start, because it got me into ingredient lists, and that just fascinated me and opened up a whole new world, and a really positive, wonderful world that, you know, it changed my life. But it changed my life in skin ways too, because it is that notion of being feeling like you can take charge. It's very powerful.
Very powerful. So before we dive into the actives, just because I think obviously there's a gut piece of this, there's a mind piece, there's so many levels really, isn't it, when we're talking about the skin. You mentioned there that you were really meticulously noting down what you were eating and what those triggers were, and you worked out that old wine was better than new world wine. What were the other things when you were going through it? Because I know, for example, like with acne, dairy is a very common trigger. What were you finding? Was it foods, for example, that were higher in histamine that was causing more of the problem? Or
do you know what? I mean, it was well, at one point I went down the whole salicylate route to find out whether salicylates in food were affecting me. And actually I spent a lot. I mean, I went down a rabbit hole there for months, months of my life, because salicylates are in everything, and all the things that you think you're eating that are really good, like spinach, cucumber, full of salicylates. So that was, I just gave up on that, because I actually thought, well, actually there's nothing, I could literally nothing.
Which wouldn't be very healthy anyway.
No, it wouldn't really healthy at all. And I do think that actually and particularly talked about dairy and eczema. And I remember, we can talk about this in a minute, but managing a child with eczema, and I had a great childminder at the time who said, be very careful about excluding whole food groups, because A, it might be completely unnecessary, and B, very hard to reintroduce them. So I always sort of say, you know, you've got to be quite mindful about, and also get advice on when you're managing food exclusion diets. And for me, all sorts of random things. So like tomatoes is a classic one. Not great if they're raw, but much better if they're cooked. There were certain ingredients, was one in
That's
particular called
interesting, because
phenoxyethanol.
I struggle when they're cooked, because generally it's a much more concentrated dose. So a few like cherry tomatoes in a salad is fine. But for
It's about
example, if I have a
quantity though.
tomato based, yeah, then it's
Yeah, but that's you're not comparing like with like,
no,
because
that's
the
true, because the quantity is
concentration of
different.
tomatoes is like,
Mm,
hundreds of
exactly. If you look at
soup.
tomato puree,
Yeah,
how
yeah. Yeah,
concentrated
so
that
that's
is.
different. I mean, if I
Yeah.
took the same amount of tomatoes and ate them
Okay, and
cooked
cooked
or
them.
uncooked, um, but and also it's so personal and it changes all the time. So that was one example. Also, particular ingredients in skincare. So there were several which are quite unpronounceable, but I mean, some of them are quite well known. So sulfate's not great, propylene glycol is not good, phenoxyethanol is a preservative that was commonly used to replace parabens, which there was a big scare about, and not great for me. There's one called MI. It's called, I can't even pronounce it, but it's abbreviated to MI, which has now subsequently been very closely linked to eczema, and there's all sorts of restrictions now on how you can use that. But so I could start to see ingredients in skincare, yeah, all sorts.
Propylene
But it's,
glycol.
yeah.
My understanding, when I've asked skincare companies about this, why is it there? I get told random answers from things like it's to enhance the delivery of the active ingredients and things like this. What is it there for, and what's the issue with it?
It can be different things. So that what you just described is definitely one reason. Sometimes when actives or ingredients are extracted, they're kind of put into a base of propylene glycol. So you can't sort of remove one from the other. Sometimes it's like a humectant as well, so it sort of keeps moisture in the skin. It's different things, but we don't use it. There are ways and means. There was ways to formulate differently. Sort of serums, particularly, they used to be in serums a lot, and to get that very, very light texture, and alcohol used to be formulated with serums a lot. Serums used to be formulated with alcohol a lot. You just don't need them, but it takes a lot of effort. But you just don't need them. So there are ways and means.
There are ways around it.
Yeah.
And okay. And then in terms of the mind connection, I think we were both talking offline, with our experience with children with eczema, for example, just how much stress seems to make a difference. That's something. And it's interesting what you were saying there, because about not eliminating from children's diets, that was the decision I took very early on with my daughter, because I was like, I don't really want to be restricting you when we don't yet know what could be causing it. And from an observational point of view, what I found was over time is that actually chlorine did aggravate it. She's a swimmer, but also, just the stress of being at school, even though she absolutely loves it, inherently is putting a little bit more stress. Sometimes that can cause flare-ups, so around exams and things like that. And it seems unrelated to food, because it's very easy to jump to conclusions and say, right, I'll remove this. And I think there is an element of you then conditioning the child already. We don't want children to grow up, particularly, I think, with feeling like they've got to restrict food too much for obvious reasons, particularly with girls. And that was my concern. What have you found with eczema yourself?
Gosh, all sorts. And it's fascinating hearing it, because it sort of took me back. And when my child started to get eczema, it was so much worse than when I suffered with my skin. I mean, when I suffered my skin, I was miserable, but I was just 10 times more miserable with a really young child who couldn't really communicate that well, and I felt powerless to help. So for any parents out there who's going through that, I totally understand, because you feel dreadful. With him, it was very interesting, because it onset with him quite young, and he was about 2.5, and it was when his little brother arrived, and we thought we'd managed it okay. We weren't, we were very busy business owners, but we thought he was aware that he was, I was obviously quite big. He knew there was a baby in there, but it was very interesting, very near, just before the baby came, a week before, he came up to my stomach and said, "Stay in there." And I went, "Oh, wow. Holy." Yeah, so I thought, and I said to my husband, he's not okay with this, and then when the baby arrived, it was a real shock for him, and they love each other now, it's fine, but very soon afterwards he had eczema all down his legs, and it onset, and we weren't sure whether it's because we'd moved him, we'd changed a lot, because we were moving him out of his cot, and you know, and all of these things were changing at
big
the same
things,
time.
yeah.
So, and again, we had a new mattress. We're like, is it the mattress? But actually, I think it was the stress. And what I took a long time, and because I was just so desperate to fix, and I also thought, as a skincare owner, brand owner, I mean, I should be able to do this, you know. So I just threw everything at it and tried different supplements. And so I probably didn't really know at the end what had solved it ultimately. But one thing I did do was, and I've seen this a lot since working with parents, is looking at some, and this is so simple, washing powder.
Oh yeah, I do find that actually.
So washing powder, and even people using the kinder washing powders. I'll tell you a fact. So if you wanted to remove all residues of detergents from washing powder out of your clothes or bed linen or pajamas, it would take 5 washes to get them out. If you put them in 5 times, it would take 5 times on a really hot wash to get them out. So that shows you that these residues stay. And actually what we often would say to people is just don't wash their clothes in anything. Just, you can do a hot wash or whatever without any detergent and just see. And lo and behold, about a month later, it would be getting better and better, because as they wash the clothes again, I wouldn't ever suggest to go and wash your clothes 5 times in a row. It's a pretty painful thing to do. But as time went on, particularly in pajamas, think about pajamas and think about bed linen. So we just removed all of it and didn't introduce, and for a long time later reintroduced. And actually
did you use any essential oils for kind of just freshening up? No.
I didn't. And yes, the whites don't ever look, they look pretty grey, and they don't, but you know, that was just the choice. And it made, I believe, made a very big difference. And even when I do use washing powder, I just realized that you just use about a third of the dose. I just use a third, you know. You don't need to use the whole whatever dose. So that's one thing I did. The other critical thing I did, actually, this made a huge difference, was bathing. And I think when you see all that aggravation, you just don't want to get it wet, and you're just terrified of what to do, and you think it's going to make it worse. And actually bathing is one of the single best things you can do daily. So, but it's all about the detail. And what we found to be brilliant is bathing. You have to submerge the skin for at least 5 minutes, obviously not hot water, you know, nice lukewarm water that's calming. I would put oats in the bath. So I think this was one of the most influential things. And I would put them in a tight sock and you squeeze out all the milk from the oats until the water is like a Cleopatra bath. It's more milky. You let them submerge under that, and it should be for at least 5 minutes, but no more than 10. And that's really, and I used to put a timer on, because after 10 minutes, it's thought that the air starts to draw moisture out of the skin. So you get them out, and you need to get them dry, patted dry very gently. And you need to get a lotion on or a cream on within seconds.
So you lock in that moisture.
You get the moisture, you get a moisturizer on very, very quickly, and then let that dry. And then I used to put a balm on top to seal everything in. And I would make him sleep in short pajamas, so that his skin could breathe and everything could dry well. And it was transformative.
Yeah, that's very similar to me, actually. But I can't work out as well whether there's an element of because my daughter's was always mild in any event, but whether there's an element as well of just outgrowing these things as well. Yes. It's interesting, I think, as they get older.
Particularly if it is stress related. And it sounds like in both our children's cases, there was definitely an element of stress. And maybe, you know, who knows, maybe part of it was that he just got used to having a brother. You know, so you just don't know. But I do think, and actually I used to see him go into the bath, you know, the inflammation in the skin was distressing, and he'd come out and the oats had visibly calmed it, So I think it was a combination. But yeah, and you know, and you have to be really careful here, because obviously, again, I would say, I don't know, I haven't seen your daughter's skin, but my son's was bad, but it wasn't extreme eczema at all. And many children's are, and you have to, your GP has its place there, and steroids can have their place. But I think the problem is that there is a very particular way to apply them, and they shouldn't be used long term. And the trick with steroids is you use them as soon as you see a smidgen, and you get it on quickly. And then you shouldn't need to reapply. It should just act very quickly, and you nip it in the bud. You shouldn't just be applying everywhere, and you shouldn't be
Whereas I
applying.
think a lot of people assume I'll wait and hopefully it will get better, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, and then they go for a steroid cream.
It's the way you apply it, and you shouldn't have to apply it repeatedly, and you should apply it in isolated spots where it's needed. But we never went down that route because we didn't have to. But it was painstaking, but worth it. And he's fine now. So lucky us.
Yeah. I mean, likewise, as I say, my daughter's was quite mild. So I think for people listening, it's hard, isn't it? Because if your child has very severe eczema, or I know my hairdresser actually has very bad eczema, she really struggles with it. And I think as an adult, that can be. Let's talk about the skincare then, because you offer consultations, which is quite unusual for many companies. So people can actually get a consultation and really understand how to target their skin. Let's where's the best place to start, do you think? Let's say someone who maybe has hydration issues and they feel like their skin's a little bit dull. What kind of products? Because I know as soon as I think of like dullness, I think of vitamin C. But vitamin C, I've struggled actually from breakout perspective. I think vitamin C can be quite challenging sometimes, depending on the delivery system. Because I've used some that are not in a water base, and then other ones in an oil that are quite challenging. So I'm curious your thoughts.
That's fascinating. This is all about. Do you know what? If you react to vitamin C, it's very unlikely to be the vitamin C you're reacting to. It's everything else. So to your point, the delivery agents is also concentrations, and the fact that if you're using a water-soluble vitamin C, which is actually usually the culprits for most, it's interesting it's different for you, is because for that vitamin C to stay active, because water-soluble vitamin C is so unstable, you have to keep it at a pH of 3.5 for it to stay at all active. And the other problem, so that's not great for the skin. So your whole formula is too low a pH, which is very imbalancing. So that's an issue. But equally, any water-soluble ingredient cannot penetrate the skin. It cannot. Your skin is a barrier, and it's designed so that when we jump in the swimming pool, we don't inflate with water. It is, you can't easily absorb water soluble ingredients. So that's the issue. And so water vitamin C's, water-soluble vitamin C's, that's why they're often in such high concentrations, because you have to put masses in just to hope that some of it will work.
Check now, because this is on a spray.
Right. So you want an oil soluble. You always want an oil soluble. It just sounds like it's the formula. The rest of the formula you need to think about that might be challenging, because an oil soluble is the right pH. It penetrates the skin properly. It doesn't release into the skin until it's in the skin. That's really important. That's what you want. So it's slow releasing, and you get a controlled dose. So from your first drop to your first pump to your last pump of your bottle, you're getting the same amount. So
it shouldn't actually have any contact with the air either, presumably, because it's so unstable. Because what you'll see, some of them are in even in oil, because sometimes they'll come in sort of a tincture format. Is that okay? Because then you're opening it and exposing it.
That's fine if it's oil soluble. Oil soluble is very stable, and you can heat an oil soluble vitamin C to 80 degrees and it'll be fine. Right? So oil soluble, very, very stable, and that's one of the benefits of it. It's the water soluble that has to be either encapsulated or you don't want it. It's very, very sensitive to air, heat, light, temperature. No, what else? What have I not said? So but anyway, you asked a very important question, which was where to start. And let's take the example of dehydration, but I would apply this to actually any person's skin issue or frustration. Good skin health is all about cleansing. It starts with cleansing every time. And I cannot tell you over the last decade how many people's skin we have helped just by fixing their cleansing. And it's usually because often cleansers contain surfactants, so they're and they don't always foam. Often a good clue of that is that it foams, but often there are even cream cleansers that have surfactants in them. It's a really cheap way of getting dirt and grime and makeup off easily. But again, it's all about pH. They spike your pH, they strip away your natural oil, your skin panics and overproduces. Or if you've got an older skin type that struggles to produce oil, you're kind of prematurely aging your skin every day. But fundamentally, I use the analogy of probiotics. right? Detergents don't have the antibiotics, sorry. Antibiotics don't have the intelligence to leave kind of good bacteria in your gut, right? They just whip through. And it's the same with detergents and cleansers. They just whip everything away very efficiently, but they strip everything, including all your good oil that you want. And so your skin has to overproduce, or it struggles to replace. So
which would aggravate acne then.
It does all sorts of things. Actually, with acne, that it's really damaging for acne, because any skin that's doesn't have enough oil will overproduce, but also that skin is really dehydrated. So often, actually, it's really interesting. People with acne have dehydrated skin, but don't realize, because they're cleansing wrong, or often over cleansing. And so what happens is their skin is feeling like it's lacking moisture. And one of the ways it compensates is to produce oil to make it feel more hydrated. So actually, one of the tricks of that is actually to introduce oil to your skin, which anyone with acne would be horrified at. But it's incredibly helpful.
I've found it the most helpful thing, to be perfectly honest, putting oil on at night. Hallelujah. It's the thing that like calms it down. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because your skin is then not going to overproduce sebum. And it's all about the oil, because obviously you don't want a comedogenic oil. We have this beautiful oil. It's this, you won't believe the color, but it's completely black. It's black cumin seed oil. That's one of our test products, but it is on the market now. And it's black cumin seed oil and charcoal. But that's a beautiful oil that's actually going to detoxify the skin. But it's lovely to use. It's very light, but it just traps moisture in. So you're not going to have that issue. Your skin's not going to overproduce oil. It's going to kind of regulate your sebum production. But anyway, back to cleansing. That's the point is that whatever your skin type, poor cleansers will imbalance your skin. And once you have imbalanced skin, you're on a kind of high road to nowhere, but it's very hard to come back from. And what we see often is people will cleanse and their skin, get that feeling of tightness after if you cleanse. If you feel that, you're using the wrong cleanser. Stop.
How can you effectively take makeup off? Because I use like an oil, like a balm that basically removes makeup.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, there's lots of, so we have two. We have a creamy cleanser, has no surfactant at all. We're using a combination of oils, but in a cream emulsion that's either dissolve dirt or grip dirt and take it away. It's very gentle, comes with a lovely cloth. You use together. It's a beautiful, quite spa-like cleanse, but very efficient. Will take off mascara, right? You don't need these surfactants to remove. You don't need them. We also have an oil cleanse, and oil cleansers are great and brilliant, I would say, if you are somebody who wears more makeup, or particularly a mineral SPF. An oil cleanser is brilliant because it's going to very efficiently take off makeup, dissolve it. Again, mascara. I always say that a good cleanser should take off your eye makeup. You shouldn't need a separate eye makeup remover. And you just, again, but both ours you apply to dry skin, but it just dissolves dirt and you just rinse away. That one just turns to a milk and rinses away, but you've not got the sulfates and the betaines, kind of detergents in there. And honestly, the number of times I've just seen people's skin misbehaving because it's imbalanced. And we'll often do the kind of the 30-day cleansing challenge and say, go away, just because I think people come to us and say, what's the moisturizer fix, or what's the serum fix? And we're no. It's
the cleanser fix.
It's the cleansing fix. And what happens is, if you just going back to that feeling of when your skin feels tight after cleansing, you can very easily misdiagnose your skin type. So people come and say, oh, I've got very dry skin. Well, actually, no, you haven't, but you're feeling it's dry because you're using the wrong cleansers. It feels really dry all the time and tight and flaky, but it's not necessarily. And what you find is, if you get into a good habit of cleansing, I would say it can be so transformative. We can then get you on the right path. But once you've gone down that path, it's quite hard to get people back from.
And should you cleanse twice, presumably, too? That's what I've been taught, to cleanse twice to remove makeup.
Oh, in one sitting. Yes, if you've worn more makeup or SPF, I think particularly together, if you've worn an SPF day and makeup on top, a good double cleanse is great. And you could do either our oil cleanse first and then our cream cleanse, or you could do a double cleanse with either. I don't always, and I think because I have the skin I have, less is more for me. I know that. So if I've had a very light makeup day or a no makeup day, I'll just do a one-step cleanse. And even in the morning, because I have 2 young children and a business to run, I don't always cleanse in the morning. I would definitely, if I've used that black charcoal oil, I would always, but I'll give my skin a good wash and use a flannel. But I think if you're more on the hypersensitive side, just be careful and just less is more, and build from there.
And what should you do after cleansing? What's a really good morning and evening routine? So I think for somebody who is looking for that glowing skin, good hydration levels, protecting the skin against aging, enhancing collagen, what's the ideal combination here?
Okay, so let me take you through mine, because I'm all of tick, 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 right? So at night, I do a good cleanse. I would use peptides. So we have these little, I was telling you about these little
yes, these boosters, which I'm excited to
they're
see.
so cute. So this one's the inulin, so that's really good. That's a prebiotic, very good for calming and building your barrier. This is the peptides, I think. And what they are, you just put a couple of drops into your existing products.
So what peptides are they?
They are pea peptides. They're coming from pea.
Pea, okay.
And there's 2 types. My mind has gone blank, but I know they come from pea. And they so peptides are really interesting because they do send a message to your skin to produce collagen. Collagen, we have one of those coming, but collagen applied topically does not boost your collagen. It's a complete misnomer. Peptides, though, can send a message to produce collagen. So, and I have to say, it's probably one of the ingredients I've introduced more recently that has had such an impact on my skin in terms of tone and plumpness, and so it's fantastic. So I would put that into a serum. So I use our hydrating serum and apply that together. And then I would just use an oil at the end, and I would mist before an oil. So we have a lovely mist called Century Flower, really calming if you get rashy, reds, hot skin. It's good for that too. But I would mist and then apply oil. So I use it.
Oh, I think I have this mist and oil. So now I know how to use it.
So the mist. So you always say a little hack. Mist before oil is the perfect way to apply oil, because you get a very even application and you trap in that moisture. So it's just you're layering in moisture. And my other hack is I mist between most steps, because you just I do it before serum, I do it before moisturizer. I do it because it's a really nice way, because it will make your products go further. They'll apply more evenly. But with oil particularly, I just do 3 drops. This is our rosehip, and look at that color. That is carotenoids. That is just pure rosehip. We use the whole hip, not just the seeds. Omega-3, 6, 7, 9. It's magical. It's our cult product, and it's the thing we're most famous for. But just 3. But most rosehip doesn't look like
3 drops.
3 drops, and you're just going to pat that. You just literally put it between your fingers, and you just pat onto the skin, onto misted skin.
So you shouldn't rub in. I often see this when I look at videos on Instagram. Anyone that's in the beauty industry, they always gently pat.
Gentle pat.
And why is this? Why do we do this?
Just because you just don't want to. Well, particularly for me, I mean, I have dermographism, so I don't want to just do loads of this, because I would get rashes. You just want to gently pat, because you just don't want to kind of push and pull the skin.
Okay.
Eye cream, you want to apply low and let it absorb what it needs. But so that's my evening, and then in the morning I would just cleanse and then moisturize, and then SPF. And the moisturizer I would use is a vitamin C, and great to pair with SPF. And vitamin C is, you can use a vitamin C moisturizer at night, but it's better in the day because it has this brilliant antioxidant. It's a brilliant antioxidant. It's going to really help prevent against UVA B damage. So it's all about the quality of the vitamin C. And
do you have a SPF that's
we do
natural? It's not a chemical sunscreen.
It's a mineral sunscreen. Everything's a chemical. Let's not forget. So we got it. So I always sort of say, when people say, "Oh, it's chemical," water's a chemical. Everything's a chemical. So, but it's not. It's a mineral one. It's not a more synthetic.
Synthetic. That's a better word.
Yeah. But it's a mineral, and it's called British Summertime.
British Summertime.
And we call it that not because it's British Summertime. We call it because of the BST, because of when the clocks go forward, and that feeling as Brits when the clocks go forward and it's spring, we start summer officially. Start at British Summertime.
That's when I generally get excited.
It's a joyous moment in every
isn't it?
British person's life. Like we literally are euphoric.
So.
The next day we're walking around the streets and everyone's lovely to each other because we're euphoric. And that's why we just called it that, because we just love that day.
That's a great name. And it's so true, because I think now we're recording this at the end of September. Goodness me, I just noticed with the busyness, those lovely summer walks, that if I hadn't, I take my dogs out a little bit in the morning, but if I didn't have time, I was really busy, like podcasting and coaching and things all day, that's okay, because I could have a beautiful evening walk. And now it's just going. So yesterday evening, my daughter was playing hockey and the sun was just going just so fast while I was trying to walk the dogs, and it's cold and it's wet, and then they come back grubby and dirty, and it's just praying for March to roll back around again.
Well, someone said to me yesterday, it's the problem with this time of year is you're just entering the tunnel, and I thought it was so well put, because you just see this long it's a long 5 months before you come out the other end. Anyway, on that just cheery note.
The only thing I suppose I do see the benefit is you do get to see, as long as it's a clear day, every sunrise and sunset. You can pretty much guarantee it. And I did that with my son one year. We sort of decided to take photos of the sun rising and setting. That was a kind of our way of getting through those winter months, and actually was really lovely. It's special. We still got the photos. Yeah,
that's so nice.
So it's nice.
I like the change of seasons. I like the change of seasons, really. I wouldn't want it to be summer all the time.
No, exactly. So, okay. And then what about these actives? Because this is exciting. I always like the idea of adding something extra in if you want to give it a little bit of a boost. How do those work?
So you can use, the beauty of them is we're calling them our affordable actives. So it really is our kind of cost of living crisis answer for people that if you don't, well, there's different dimensions to this. The first is that I was continually told I couldn't use actives because I have, hypersensitive skin. And I was like, well, I'm in my mid-40s and I'd quite like some, an extra bit or, bit of a boost. So I would say, actually, if you do have challenging skin, there's absolutely no reason you can't. First of all, it's about finding the quality of the ingredient and the quality form. And that's been really sensitively made and thoughtfully made for your skin type. So that's the first thing. We're trying to do them really affordably. So they're £19, which is amazing. So you can you just put a drop into your existing product. So and the beauty of them is they're so versatile. So you could put vitamin C, a drop into your moisturizer in the morning, and then you could put a drop of peptides into your evening routine, whether it's a serum or oil even, and they blend really well together. And it's just a great way of doing it without you necessarily. I think, again, if you're somebody who has struggled with skin and maybe you found a good groove, right, with the products you're using, you can add your Pai concentrates into your existing products without having to go out and spend another £100 on a new product.
Yeah, add these actives in. I'm thinking about the charcoal one. What was it? Charcoal with?
That's not an active. That's
not an active. That's something else.
I just showed you the little mini form. This is the little mini.
Okay.
Bigger bottle. This isn't an active. This is just a facial oil that we have called Carbon Star, but it's very much for acne-prone, blemish-prone skin.
I was thinking that might be a good thing before diving into the sauna, maybe.
No, well, you would want your skin into a sauna. Well, I think you want it
free.
You want your skin free. So
there's some
the
things
toxins
you can use. Well, yeah. Would it inhibit the toxins though? Because the oils go in I thought they'd penetrate quite deeply and quickly. Or would you advise waiting?
I wouldn't put, personally, I wouldn't go into a sauna with skincare
with anything on.
I'd want, part of the point of saunas is that you're purging.
I didn't know if your charcoal was going to help with that.
No, because I think it was in a different form, maybe, but because it's in an oil form, I think it would just seal in the skin. I think it might seal it. I think you want to do a proper sweat.
So how would the charcoal work in terms of detoxifying then? Are you putting it on at night?
You put it on at night, and you would only ever use this product at night.
Oh, okay.
Only at night. You'd never put it on the morning. And what it does is it just generally absorbs kind of oxidized sebum and just impurities in the skin, and then in the morning you do a really good cleanse in the morning, and then it washes away. But the black cumin seed is in there too, so that's again what's giving that beautiful color. And the hero ingredient is actually the black cumin seeds, and it's got it's extraordinarily complex, but in its simplest description it's really antibacterial, but it's really kind on the skin as well. Because I think if you think about spot treatments, and they tend to have a benzoyl peroxide in them, they often have a salicylic acid in them. Not everyone, salicylic acids are milder obviously, but some people really struggle with it. And benzoyl peroxide is just a pretty harsh ingredient that actually I always say is one of those ingredients that comes to fix a problem and leaves behind a different one. no skincare ingredient or skincare product should fix one thing and leave a different problem. And I think benzoyl peroxide, you get that beautiful crust around the spot afterwards. It's just drying out the skin. It leaves the skin imbalanced. And there's ways to tackle acne, and actually the best way is to keep the skin in balance. So you're tackling the inflammation and you need a bacterial action. So that's what this product does so beautifully. So it's going to tackle, and what I would say is that it's a great product to use it preventatively or in the active stage of a breakout. And in the rosehip, which I showed before, the bright orange oil is great for the end of a breakout.
Just for sort of calming inflammation,
for healing. So it's great if you've got one of this sort of a persistent blemish or scar that just won't budge. So people love that oil for acne scars. It's just going to just push on the healing. It's a very regenerative ingredient.
And what about your thoughts around things like hyaluronic acid, for example, for hydration?
Really good. There's a lot of debate about hyaluronic acid, and I think that's pretty unfair, and I think people don't understand enough how it works, but it's brilliant. It's why it's been in the beauty industry so long, and it stood the test of time, because it's a fantastic skin hydrator. So I'm all in favor. It's in the mist, actually. It's in our mist. It's in our vitamin C serum, but it features in our serums.
And you've got from the beta carotene, presume, like natural vitamin A to kind of help enhance collagen production. Is that
beautiful? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Well, as I say, I've just started experimenting with the products. They smell and feel beautiful. So excited. I think I'm probably going to head over and pick up some of your actives to try as well and just drop them in. I think I'm kind of addicted to skincare. Yeah. I always like playing with it. And my daughter now, she's 10 and she's got quite into it. She's like, Mommy, can I come and use your oils? When the Pai Skincare arrived, she was like, yes. Oh, what's this?
Yeah, be careful. We hear this a lot from mums, actually, saying, my bloody daughter is just...
Yep.
Actually, last night from someone saying, my bloody son is just keeps nicking my moisturizer. So anyway.
I've got this vibrant blue oil that smells amazing. She's now associated it with sleep. So she goes and puts on, but I think a couple of drops that I might use, a drop or two, the bottle's going down so quickly. I'm thinking, I look at her skin, I'm like, you're looking glowing, Yasmina. And I think maybe it's like overuse. Makes it expensive. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this. Where can people find out more about you, Sarah, the consultations, the skincare? Please share.
So website is paiskincare.com. You can book on there. So the consultations, don't forget, you can book very easily on there. You can have as many as you want. They're completely free. We're on Instagram at Pai Skincare, and my personal channel is at Pai Skincare _Sarah with an H.
_Sarah. Lovely. We will link to all of that in the show notes. It's been amazing to have you on. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.